Hey everybody, welcome to session 2 of the follow-up post-processing classes for the Built More Macro Workshop. If you're listening to this video and you're in Sharpen Your Shutter, yay! You get to hear this too because you're part of our tribe. Okay, so I'm calling this session 2 because I think this is the one that's needed most urgently. Session 1 is going to be a very basic, like down to the basics of how to work in Photoshop. Session 3 is going to take me a lot longer to produce because that's going to be much more advanced techniques that, I'll be honest with you, I am still perfecting. So wait for me for session 3. Session 1 will come out immediately after session 2, but this is session 2. This is basically the meat of what you need to know how to process in the workflow that I do, if you like it. A lot of you all are up and running. A lot of you guys have already retained the stuff, but I want to run through it here. We're going to jump right through it. I'm going to start off with just the first couple of things that I do with my post-processing workflow so y'all can watch, and I'm going to try to keep it concise and clear. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make a duplicate later. I just chose this picture. I like the softness of it. It's still relatively sharp in here. The softness I can tell is due from not blur, but just the very small or very wide aperture I chose at a really small number. So I'm going to right click on that layer to make a duplicate layer. So this is going to be my first starting off point. And the first thing I'm going to do is kind of get rid of anything that's distracting. That's always the first step because like I mentioned in the class, you really need to take care of those things. That's pretty vital that you take care of those things early in the game. You can't go back and say, oh, well, this leaf is distracting. You know, when you're knee deep into it, it's going to wreck the entire image and all the textures and things that you put on top of it. So we want to take care of that first and foremost. To do that, I'm just going to grab my spot healing brush tool, which is this guy right here. I think that's what it's called. This Band-Aid tool. I'm going to take out what I think is kind of causes me issues. I'm going to see if I can very easily get rid of this little bit right here. I'm okay with how that looks. I could probably do it a lot cleaner, but that's fine. Just nub that thing out, that little dead piece. The other thing that's kind of bugging me is this right here. I don't want it to distract from what's going on, so I'm just, as you can see, I'm just running the spot healing brush tool and it magically goes away. I like that a lot better. That was just a little bit distracting, and I really want the eye to come up and go this way. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if maybe this would look better flipped, because then we've got our line coming in this way. I don't know, but let's try it. To do that, we're going to go to Image, Image Rotation, and we're going to flip canvas horizontally. Okay, now at this point, I'm going to let it sit for a sec. Let's go back and look at it again. There it is again. I'll be honest, I think I kind of like it the way it is. So let's go ahead and leave it that way. Now, what if we would like to rotate it and we'd like to see it as a vertical? Let's just go ahead and rotate it once clockwise. Back it up a little bit. Okay, well that's really pretty too. We can decide this later, the way that we'll present it. It doesn't necessarily need to happen now, so we're going to go ahead and just process it like this. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to work off this background copy, and we're going to go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. So this is, again, Lightroom's Red-Headed Stepsister, and we're going to make some tweaks to this. What this red is that immediately pops up is you can see that this box up here is selected. This is basically telling us that some of our colors are just kind of getting a little bit too crazy. Let's ignore that for just now, and we're going to just shut that off. The first thing in this that I would do is I would first say, do I want to make this cooler? Obviously not a lot, but a little bit cooler, something like this. Or do I want to make it warmer? As you can see, it's going to adjust and change the hue of both the flower, the purple of the flower, and this. That's plus 21. Double click on it and it resets you back to 0. So what if we went to plus 8? Reset, go to 0. Okay, I don't know, while I like this up here, and I like it a little bit opened more, I don't know, I think I'm losing the richness of this purple, so I might not like it. However, I do like how it opens up. The next thing you can adjust is your temperature. You can change your tint, your tint. So you can change your tint to kind of this green. You can see it's mostly changing the background. Let's leave it where it is, just for now. The next thing I'll do is I'll play with my exposure. I'm really going to want to bring that exposure and lift that up. I want this to be a nice, bright, and airy sort of feeling. So I think we're going to lift this up. I'm going to take my shadows. Okay, kind of looking a little crazy there. Bring these highlights and these whites down just a smidge. Okay, we're good. I'm going to take my shadows. I'm going to just darken those just a little bit. And then I'm going to take my dehaze tool and really, see, I'm only going +9. This isn't something you want to go crazy on. Just a little bit of your dehaze tool will kind of make that pop a little bit. At this point, if I wanted to color adjust ever so slightly, what I might do is I would probably take these reds, and I bet you if we change the hue of the red in the backgrounds, see, it's going to adjust it to a pink, or it's going to turn it. I like it more of this neutral color. So I'm going to kind of put the hue for that background kind of somewhere in this area. I don't know that I necessarily want it kind of as pink as it is right there, but I think if we bring it up this way, that would be great. In the same token, I'm going to also take the reds and I'm going to desaturate them. So you can see I took the reds because that was the background. I've gone the hue, saturation, and luminance. Hue is adjusting the color. So watch my greens when I go to green and I take it towards this yellow. All my greens turn yellow. That's adjusting the color itself. Saturation is going to be the light and the dark. So you can see now it's making it really, and it's even, you can see the pixelation when you take it to the extreme. Or you can take it negative and you can see the pixelation. You want to find something that's kind of midpoint. You don't ever want to do this too dramatically. And in fact, check out this right here. I think that might have happened when we went to such a high hue. Yeah, it did. So we pushed it a little bit too far. Watch for fragmenting of your pixels around that when you do this. I think right there we're okay though, and when we add some textures we'll be fine. Let's go to the saturation and just bring that down just a smidge. Now you see we've saved our pixels. Where it was once starting to kind of go a little bit crazy, we're okay. I don't think we need to adjust anything else. That's the saturation, obviously. That's going to make it more saturated or less. And then luminance is how bright or how dark a color is. Notice when I boosted up my luminance, we're still getting this fragmenting here around, like a haloing. We don't want that. So we're going to go ahead and leave that where it is, and we're going to hit OK. Now, mind you, as well, I'm working off a JPEG file and not a RAW. So if you think that you are working on a file and you were shooting RAW and JPEG, and you have a file that's going to need a lot of work, then I'm going to highly recommend to you that you be doing all of this work off of RAW, because you push the JPEG too far and it's going to go wonky. Okay, we've got that. We've made those adjustments. So now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to make another layer just for kicks and giggles. So we haven't really changed anything, so that's why I'm just duplicating right now. Let's say starting layer 2. So now here's our new jumping off point. At this point, I do want to add some textures. I want textures here in that background. Maybe not even necessarily here on the flower so much, but I definitely want it in the background. So I'm going to click on my flypaper textures. Now, at this point, we could add a texture in from our files. And to do that, you have hopefully created a texture file folder. So here's mine. I call it Briley Textures. I've got only 2 in here. I have no idea what happened to the others. But, oh, here. I've got swells and I've got swoosh. Let's use swoosh. So this is how you're going to do any of the textures we created at Biltmore. You're going to go ahead and you're going to select this entire frame. Okay? Now you're going to press Command C. And then you're going to go back to your file. So you can see it opened up in a new tab. Go back to the file that you're working on and press Command V. That's going to paste the other picture on top of this one. Now I want you to press Command T. And that Command T is we're going to move it up over here to the top left. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to just pull down this right down here. Now notice I'm changing the aspect ratio when I do this. If you were going to do something like this with a Command T, which is transform, on a nature image, you'd want to hold down your shift, because then that's going to retain the size. See how I'm kind of going all over the place and it's holding the ratio? We don't want to worry about that right now. We just kind of want to get it covering where we are. We're going to hit enter and that locks it in place. So now our texture is spread across our picture. If we take it on and off, that layer on and off, we've got it, we're good. It's right there. Okay, now we're going to change this little bit right here. We're going to go from normal to soft light. Typically, overlay, soft light, and sometimes hard light are the ones that I'm going to use for textures, but putting it on soft light, I really love the painterly texture that that's giving us. I think that's amazing. However, I really want to desaturate it on the petal itself because it's kind of taking away. So here's what I think let's do. Just to kind of start us off, we're going to go ahead and make this a mask. So I'm doing that down here. And I'm going to hit my brush. And remember, if we want to take something off, we're going to change the top color here to black. Now, with a pretty high opacity, something around 80%, I'm going to make a smaller brush and I'm going to start taking it off. Okay, you don't have to, this can be a little bit sloppy. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you kind of do want to have a brush the size of whatever it is that you're taking off. Again, we're going to be layering a lot more textures, but we're going to just kind of do a quick and dirty job of pulling it off. It's adding back in some of the tonal value. We might leave a little bit of it on here. We can leave a little crackle there. Pull it off a little bit here. I think I'm going to reduce the opacity and I'm going to pull it off. Let's make it bigger, bigger brush. Really kind of don't want it to showing here. Okay, so now we're getting some dimension. Now, for the stem, I still want to keep the texture, but I want to kind of leave it off a little bit. I'm going to pull it off here too. Okay, so now it looks like we have the flower on top of the texture. Let's go ahead and lower our opacity to 40% and let's just pull it a little bit off the stem. Not a whole ton, but just a little bit. Let's get it off there. We can always add more if we want to. It's blurred, so it needs to have a little bit of texture to it. But we also want it to stand out so that it doesn't look like this thing is just like floating with just its head. Let's go ahead and go up to 60%. You can see I just changed my opacity to 60, and we're going to just try this again. Take a little bit more off. Okay, I'm really not a fan. Let's take it on and off. I'm really not a fan of how this is going, so I'm going to back out. I'm going to turn this to white because I want to erase some of the stuff I just did and thinking maybe we do want the texture on it. Yeah, we are. I think we're going to want a little bit of it. Interesting. Let's not stop here. I think if we stop here with, ooh, I don't like this green, I think we'd get really messed up. Tell you what we need to do. We probably need to add some green texture onto this. So I'm going to go back to the flypaper textures, and we're going to look at any of the textures that have some green. This one does. It has a really nice mix. Let's add this one and see what happens to it. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. This is good. So let's turn it on and off. See, it's kind of helping us lift a little bit. I also love that it almost looks like we're getting a little bit of, you can see it looks textury here. I do want to reduce it a little bit. I'm going to take our opacity to 40% and brush it a little bit off. Had to change my color. If you're painting and it does nothing, you're probably painting white on white like I was just doing. So now we're putting black on top with the brush. We're going to take this off a little bit. See, we're just pulling it off ever so slightly just to make sure we don't lose that color. That purple color is so pretty. Okay, we're good. You can see it was kind of quick and dirty with that. But notice the fine lines. It almost looks like somebody just photographed the weave of a texture of a canvas. I really love that about it. So I think we're good there. Let's go ahead, and I think I almost want to duplicate this one again. So let's just go ahead and duplicate this layer. Did you see how I did that? I just went to this layer, highlighted it, right-clicked, and went to duplicate because I really love the stroke of that and I want to keep it. So now notice when I duplicated it, it's actually keeping all the same masking that I did and it's replicating it. So it's exactly the same as this layer, and we're going to take this one and put it on top. Now I think we're kind of, I think I really like where we're going. I'm loving the brush strokes of this. I think it's very pretty, but I know that we're far from being done. I'll tell you what I think we should also do. Let's go ahead and open up our filters. Let's make a completely new fresh start. So to make a new fresh start, we want to go from here, the top layer, hold down your shift, go to the bottom layer, And then you're going to press Shift Option Command E or Shift Alt Command E if you're on a PC. We're going to call this Base Layer 3. Okay, from Base Layer 3, now we're going to go use Nik filters. Why did I make a new base layer? Well, because if we started pulling Nik filters into this and we did it on this top layer here, it wouldn't read the whole image combined. It would actually make adjustments to our texture, not the whole file. So anytime you're going to want to go use Nik filters, you're going to need to make a new base layer so that you can pull the information from the base layer. I hope that makes sense. So let's go to Filter, and then let's go to Nik Collection. And let's have a peek at the Color Efex Pro. Now, I want to just walk you through a couple of my favorites. We're certainly not going to use all these on this picture, but for the sake of teaching, I want to just run through some of the ones I want you guys to try to play with on your own. Just play around with them. They're really intuitive. They're really fun. One of my favorites is the Brilliance Warmth. You can make this image a lot warmer. You can saturate it. It's really easy. Another one's the Classical Soft Focus. I really like this one too. It kind of makes it bright. You can control the brightness of it. You can make it darker. There's a lot that you can do with it. In fact, I'd be really tempted if it wasn't for this white up here to take this a lot brighter, but let's just leave that where it is. You can also control the strength of the glow and the diffuse detail. There's some options here, so you can check with that. In fact, any of these over here, these presets or the control things, let's say the Classical Soft Focus where we are. If you click on this button right here, it's going to actually open up presets for you. So there's diffusion, a soft focus, a strong soft focus, soft focus, all of those. So if you just need some ideas, check those out. Classical Soft Focus is another fun one. I think another one that I like is definitely Darken, Lighten, Center. That has a lot of use not only in our nature images, our big scapes, but in our macro as well. That'll be a nice, fun, easy way to provide a soft vignette. Detail Extractor is a lot of fun, but be careful with it because it can really jack up your image, that being the technical term, not really. But yeah, it can be kind of crazy. The Skin Softeners one, if you want to make a petal softer, definitely try playing with that one. That's kind of fun too. And I'm not going to spend time going through what each and every one of these does. That's maybe a time for a different one. I just want to show you the ones I want you to start playing with and getting familiar with. Glamour Glow is another fun one because this is just going to give you this really pretty glow effect. Again, you can change your coolness or your warmth on the glow, but you can have a lot of fun with Glamour Glow. If you want to just pick your favorites, what I would do is I'd go through and I just hit, you can hit the star, and then that'll kind of remind you over which ones you might want to use and play with. High key can be kind of interesting sometimes. Like that'll give it a very painterly feel. I actually really like that look. I think that's really pretty. You can adjust them over here. Pastel is a really, really pretty one to kind of play with and work. You can make all sorts of changes with that. And then I think the other one I'm going to recommend after Pastel, sometimes Skylight Filter can be pretty if you want to add a little bit of a glow to it. But the other one I really like is Vignette Blur. So you can actually put blur on here, which is really pretty. Same thing as you do Light and Darken Center. You place your center. You do that here. You say this is going to be my center, and I want it to be fairly up and down. My size needs to be pretty big. Size pretty big, and then you can go. Notice it's not going to work with this one, and the reason why it's not going to work with this is because we're losing our texture. And I think what we probably needed to have done if we wanted to go with a soft blurred background, we didn't need to on this because we were already blurred in the background, so there's really no need for it. But if you're going to do a vignette blur, you probably want to do the vignette blur before you add your texture, because otherwise you're going to just, your texture is going to be a moot point because you've got texture here, no texture here. So we're not going to want to stick with that one. I think out of all these though, I don't know, guys. I think the one I was kind of liking the most was the Pastel, which takes us into a completely weird new angle. I'm going to just kind of play with this and see. I like that. Maybe we won't even keep it. Let's take it down the diffusion quite a bit. And let's take the saturation down just a bit. kind of find out where we might want to be with the contrast. I like this. I like what it's doing, but I'm not digging what's happening here. So in this case, I'm actually, pardon my dog, in this case, I'm actually not even going to use a Nik filter on this one. But those are the ones that I want you to know about. Oh, we just probably lost everything. Okay, well, good thing we can start it over. So those are the ones I kind of want you to think about in the future for Nik software, that ones I think will be really helpful for you. Let's find another picture and let's just keep moving. That's beautiful. Let's grab that. So we're just going to go ahead and open that one back up. Probably need to turn my Wi-Fi on. Okay, there it is. Super. That is a really small file, y'all. Let's open it back up and make it bigger. And somebody died. That's not good. Who's the Boss? Great show. Okay, so now we're going to kind of take this. We're going to make this larger. So we're going to take it 100%. Should probably just make this view and fit on screen. Perfect. Now we are somewhere. Okay, if you see this thing pop up this here, I don't ever X out of that. We kind of need it. So we're going to just kind of put it down, put it away for a minute. Okay, so let's start with this one. So obviously we've got some things to do. Beth Moore, love her. Okay, we're kind of starting from our base, and I don't want to lose traction of what we've just learned. So let me just quickly make a few tweaks on this new picture. Again, getting rid of anything distracting. Going to open it in Camera Raw. Going to make a couple quick tweaks on this. Lift up the shadows a little bit, and that's all I'm going to do on this. Don't want to spend a lot of time on something we've already done. Let's open up a texture. Same sort of thing. I'm going to pull up a texture I think that might be pretty. Okay, let me turn off my messages. Oh, they're off. Okay, so here we've got it. We're going to ignore that. So now that we've got our texture on there, we've gone through Nik, we've looked through that. I think we're pretty good. We're pretty good. I think, so the other thing I want to show you with the Nik software that's going to be really helpful to you, again, we just threw a texture on here, so we need to kind of make a new fresh start layer. But the other thing I want to show with you here is going to be, y'all, I'm so sorry, that is my people, is let's go to Vivesa too. Vivesa is a really fun one to use as well. So we've talked about color effects. Let's talk about Vivesa. We're going to open up Vivesa. And this is a great one where we can actually control the structure of things. So let's just say we wanted to kind of control this blurry area. I'm going to add a control point by collecting here and then dropping it here. So I did that by, let me do it again. You select it, you drop it in the place where you want it to be dropped. Now I want to take my saturation, or I'm sorry, my structure, which can make things like really crunchy or not at all. See, or that's really crunchy at 100%, that's not at all. I want to make sure that that key has a lot of blur. Now with any of these control points that you add, all you have to do is select on it and hit Command C, and then hit Command V, and it's going to duplicate it exactly. So you can see here in the structure, it's down to 0% because it copies that one right there. So we're good there. Now, if I wanted to say, oh, that might be touching over here, then we can just go ahead and, well, I don't know if it is or not. Let's check and see what it's doing. Okay, no, it's not touching. So what I did is I went down here to the control point list and I selected the one that we just did, and you can see it's not actually touching here. So we're good. We'll unclick that so we can see our picture again. Let's say we also wanted to add a control point and we wanted to boost the brightness on it. We can just do that by clicking on the control point, dropping it here on our leaf, and raise the brightness. Now I'm going to hit Command C, or yeah, Command C, and then Command V, and I'm going to drop another control point right down here. Command C again, and Command V somewhere down in this area. That's not a good place for it to be. Try here. Yeah, I like that a lot too. So now we'll leave it there. Now we're going to hit OK, and I think we're going to just add some more textures. This is roughly the workflow that I'm going to do. I'm going to just kind of play around with it. We've now done a new picture, so it may be that on this new one I want to go back to Nik Software. But pretty much fundamentally, I've shown you what I typically do. One, I check, is there actually, let's just do this recap. Step number one, is there anything that's distracting in my image I need to get rid of? Look at it really closely. If there's something that's distracting in your image, like a little dead piece of the leaf or a dead part of a bloom, if you can easily get rid of it with your spot healing brush tool right here, I would just go ahead and do it. The second thing I do is I open it up into the Camera Raw filter. This is going to be where I prep the canvas. So I'm going to adjust my my exposure. I might change the tint a little bit or the temperature. I might play with the tint a small bit and make it a little bit, pink or green. I might adjust my shadows and my contrast, my highlights, and then I might just give it a little bit of dehaze. So that'll kind of set us up for where we need to be. Just to reiterate, I might go into my HSL, my hue, saturation, luminance, and adjust colors in here. But for now, we're just going to hit OK. So after that, then I start adding textures to whatever I want to see, just for kicks and giggles. Let's go ahead and open that, that one texture that we did before under Briley Textures. You can see how messy my files are. That was swoosh. Actually, let's do swells. And we're going to just hit the selection tool. I just hit Command A, and that kind of put all the ants on there for me, so I've selected this. Now I'm going to hit Command C, and now we're going to go back here, and we're going to just hit Command V, and we're going to place it on there. Command T then will allow us to stretch this. And now here's a really fun little tool I want you guys to know about. Let's get it all fully stretched down. You notice how this is just kind of dull, and it's actually a little bit kind of warm. I want to change it. Here's what we can do. On this layer, we can actually go and do a Camera Raw filter adjustment on this one layer, like on the texture itself. Now, I'll be real honest with you, in most cases, I will have already done this at the time I brought in the texture. But sometimes in this case, I will tweak as I go. So if I have a picture that has cooler tones, I might adjust my temperature and I might make it a lot cooler or a lot warmer, just depending on where I need the shade to fall. In this way, I'm going to kind of keep it pretty neutral. But did you notice what I did here to kind of bring out my brush strokes? I just bumped up my dehaze. You can also bump up your clarity, and that's going to bring out the texture and the smushiness in the lines of your brush strokes. So don't forget, you have that option. You can adjust and tweak your texture when you put it down to make it how you need to be. You can also do that with flypaper textures, just so y'all know. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my soft light, lay it over top, and I really like what it's doing there. So now I'm going to have another reset layer, and here's the last kind of tool I want to show you. I would go to the sharpen tool, this triangle. If you can't find it, it's in this general area. It could be hiding underneath blur or smudge. But if you right click in this area, you want to have the sharpen tool. With a pretty strong strength and a really small brush, this would be where I would start tracing edges. Tracing the edges of your lines is going to help establish some depth in your image. Every image is going to be different, but I'm really going to want to draw out some pretty good lines. Okay. The other thing that you can do is we can go ahead and do the image or the layer, new layer, gray, soft light, fill with soft light neutral gray. And I'm going to go ahead and I think I'm actually going to paint with light. So with this, so I have my brush, I'm on the layer, I'm putting white on top because I want to paint with light, and now I'm going to take my opacity and I'm going to lower it to like 20%. Now, with a really small brush, I'm actually just going to paint some light in on my edges. Anytime that you're defining edges, you see this, it's going to accentuate it, and it's actually going to fake detail. So where you don't have a ton of details, you can actually make it look sharper than it is by adding light and shadow. So in this, I'm just going to add some light. Now, please add light in where light exists, but don't add light in where it doesn't exist. And mostly you're wanting to bring out the details and the curvature. So I'm adding that in here. Now I'm going to switch. I would recommend that we do another layer and we do 2 layers. So we've got layer paint with light, paint with shadow. So let's call this paint with shadow. We neglected to name our last one, so we should do that. Fill with, it's so important that you guys click that or else it won't work. Let's call this one paint with light. Tell you what, that quitting in my Photoshop really threw my game. Okay, so now we got back on the brush and we've put the black on top. So now you can just kind of brush in some shadow work where shadows kind of exist. So we're not going to want to put it in, but we can put it in here, put it in a little bit here. Now you see how just that one stroke alone, let's back up. Notice how that gave me so much more definition and shadow? It's almost like my lines are stronger now. And this is so fun. It's so fun to do this. Okay, so quick, dirty, and easy. Those are some of my favorite tips on how to use the tools that you have to make some beautiful art. I'll tell you honestly, this whole thing is really just about playing. It's just about taking these tools that I've just showed you and then, you know, really just playing with them, trying out new things, see what works, see what doesn't work. Some things will work, some things won't, but you just play around with it and eventually the image will talk to you and you'll find it. So I'm so proud of y'all for your abilities. Just seeing your stuff in Sharpen Your Shutter has been amazing. You guys are doing so great. I hope that this little recap on some of my favorite tools really helps you. And I will see you all later.